Hi, Dr. Flair. I am excited to share my diversity, biases, and special populations presentation with you today. I think first and foremost, it's important that we as behavioral health professionals are aware of what characterizes someone as a member of a special group. So this is any marginalized identity, such as LGBTQ plus individuals, racial minorities, people with disabilities, the houseless community, any group that is we visibly facing systemic disadvantages in our society. I think this is important information we need to take with us in providing unprejudiced, unbiased, and culturally competent care for these individuals and these groups. And today I really wanted to explore the intersectionality between the communities and cultures of both homelessness and LGBTQIA plus identities, and the way that their compounding traumas and mental health issues has impacted their discrimination in the behavioral healthcare field, as well as their access to care. So LGBTQ individuals are actually 120% more likely to experience homelessness than their cisgender heterosexual peers. So they make up about 40% of the homeless population, which may not seem like much, but considering our entire population here in America, only less than 5% of people identify themselves as part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and that's why that is such a staggering number to see of LGBTQ people represented in homelessness. Homelessness is linked to poor mental health, point blank, period. The anxiety, depression, the trauma, the PTSD that they are facing from surrounding stigmas, prejudices, and biases against them just for being homeless is now compounded due to the fact that they are also identifying as LGBTQIA+. So a lot of this familial rejection they have experienced that has led them to homelessness is now compounded in the community around them, in shelters, on the streets, and in limited access to inclusive resources. One of the leading causes of homelessness for LGBTQ people is familial rejection due to religious stigma. And so the intersection of religious beliefs and LGBTQ identities has devastating consequences. These strict religious beliefs lead to prejudice, to stigma, and now these people who were once sheltered by their faith have now been cast out like they're nothing and are experiencing the harsh and unsheltered realities of life on the streets. In this article by Morris, they highlight this phenomenon time and time again of people who've grown up in these sheltered communities where there's ice cream in the fridge, there's laughter, there's playing, there's community support, religious support, are now coming out as their true selves and have been discarded like they're nothing and are now left to navigate the trauma and the abuse of homelessness, as well as grappling with their newfound identity, as well as now trying to figure out how to handle all of that with compounding mental health challenges that are exacerbated by homelessness. Along with that is an increased rise in hate crimes against LGBTQ houseless individuals. Transgender individuals, especially women of color, are on the top of this list and victims of these crimes because there's discrimination and there's a lack of protection for LGBTQ homeless people in public spaces. And where else do they have to go? They are extremely vulnerable and they face discrimination, verbal abuse, physical assault, and even being turned away from shelters because of their sexual identity and preference. So this environment of fear can really discourage people from reaching out, from getting mental health help, and the behavioral health field has contributed to that issue significantly. One of the stories that we see happening time and time again is these transgender women of color being brutally murdered just for existing. In this news story, we see this woman, Andrea Despasos, being brutally murdered as she was sleeping on a park bench because of her gender expression and identity and her vulnerability in being homeless. Her family said she was light, she was love, but she did have mental health challenges that had led her to experience an immense amount of trauma and assault on the streets and not being able to access the help she needed, which ultimately led to her being brutally murdered by someone in her community. And we see this happening far too often. So what is the intersection of discrimination in LGBTQ identity, homelessness, and violence? What does this all have to do with one another? Well, there's an increased risk of anxiety and depression. These isolation of people being discarded by their families, by their communities, now worsens these feelings of worthlessness, lonelessness significantly, which can further contribute to anxiety, to depression, to PTSD, and trauma. There's that vulnerability to violence and trauma that you experience being so vulnerable and homeless, now compounded by your sexual identity. So what are the long-term outcomes of homelessness, of violence against LGBTQ individuals? Chronic mental health issues, increased risk of substance abuse due to the fact that they use it to cope, feelings of isolation and lack of support, higher rates of suicidal ideation and attempts, and barriers to accessing mental health care. Understanding this intersectionality is crucial for addressing the long-term effects and promoting effective and compassionate interventions that foster healing and resilience in this vulnerable population. Long-term mental health outcomes for LGBTQ individuals experiencing homelessness are significantly affected by the trauma of discrimination and violence that they face in our communities. Homelessness and LGBTQIA individuals encounter significant prejudice not only within our society but within the behavioral health care setting as well, compounding their struggles and creating a huge barrier to accessing the necessary cultural competent care they deserve. Discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, a lack of understanding of the trauma associated with homelessness, and limited access to LGBTQ affirmative care, insufficient training of behavioral health professionals in providing that care, and then these individuals are facing barriers to seeking help because of the fear of stigma that surrounds them just simply existing. So what can we do as behavioral health professionals to combat this prejudice in our practice? I think it's important that we implement anti-discriminatory and anti-prejudice practices within our field for the benefit of homeless LGBTQ individuals. This can provide and improve access to care by creating a welcoming environment where more individuals feel encouraged to seek mental health services without the fear of being judged or marginalized. This is really important for those who have experienced rejection due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. It can enhance trust in behavioral health providers and create better mental health outcomes for this community, as well as strengthening community support. This can create a sense of safety, and we can allow our clients to open up about their experiences, their mental health challenges, and this is essential for providing effective treatment plans. And then furthermore, like that encourages better mental health outcomes. So we really need to be aware of these intersectionality and how it affects people's mental health. This is something I'm really passionate about, and I believe that all behavioral health professionals should take up a care and a passion for these marginalized communities and the intersectionality of such and how this impacts our mental health and behavioral health practices. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.